When you think of the Japanese sword, the katana, you probably picture a weapon steeped in mystery, maybe even mythology. But today, we're going to cut right through the legend and uncover the incredible science and engineering that truly forged its soul. And that right there, that single statement, is the absolute core of our entire explainer. The real genius of the katana isn't found in magic. It's found in a triumph of engineering that started with solving a very, very difficult problem with its raw materials. So, where do we even begin? Well, our investigation has to start with the raw material itself. Because to understand the blade, you first have to understand the metal it came from, and why it was such a massive challenge to work with. This is Tamahagane, which translates to jewel steel. Now, that name sounds really precious, right? But the reality of this traditionally smelted steel was, well, it was far from perfect. It was full of impurities, and the carbon levels were all over the place. A complete disaster if you're trying to forge a reliable weapon. So that's the central question, isn't it? The engineering problem that Japanese swordsmiths had to solve. How on earth do you take this inconsistent, flawed raw material and transform it into one of the greatest cutting weapons in history? Well, the answer wasn't magic, it was pure science. And here is that brilliant, if brutal, solution: forge folding. This relentless process of heating, hammering, and folding the steel back on itself did two absolutely critical things. First, with every strike, the smiths were literally forcing impurities out of the metal. And second, they were evening out the carbon distribution, creating a homogeneous, strong, and reliable block of steel. It's an absolutely exhausting but ingenious way to purify metal. But the innovation in material science didn't stop at just purification. Oh no. The smiths then created a composite blade. You see, they didn't just use one type of steel, they used two. They took that purified high-carbon steel, the Hatagane, and forge welded it around a softer, lower-carbon steel core, the Shingane. The result is an engineering marvel. You get a blade with a razor-sharp, incredibly hard edge for cutting, supported by a tough, flexible core that can absorb the shock of an impact without shattering. It's the best of both worlds, fused into one piece of steel. Okay, so we have our perfect composite steel. But what about that iconic, elegant curve? Let me tell you, that wasn't just shaped for beauty. It was actually born from a principle of pure physics. It's the sword's most recognizable feature, for sure. But that curve, the sori, it isn't hammered into the blade just for looks. It's the natural, inevitable result of the final and most critical stage of the blade's creation, the heat treatment. The secret is all in the clay. Before the final heating and quenching, the smith would carefully apply this special mixture of clay all over the blade. But here's the key. He'd put a thick layer along the spine, the back of the blade, and a very, very thin layer along the cutting edge. This specific pattern is the key to everything that happens next. And this is where physics literally forges the blade. The sword is heated to a precise temperature and then plunged into water. The edge, with its thin coat of clay, cools almost instantly. Its molecular structure transforms into an extremely hard type of steel called martensite. But the spine, insulated by that thick clay, cools much more slowly, forming a softer, more flexible steel called perlite. So you have this incredible differential. The hard edge is expanding rapidly, while the softer spine is contracting more slowly. And that physical force literally bends the straight blade into its final elegant curve. It wasn't sculpted that way, it was born that way. After the blade is polished, this whole process reveals a beautiful, wavy line near the edge. This is the hamon. And people often mistake it for just a decorative pattern, but it is so much more than that. You can think of it as the visible evidence, almost like a fossil, of that incredibly sophisticated hardening process. So the hamon has this amazing dual purpose. Aesthetically, yeah, it's the unique signature of the smith. But structurally, it marks the exact frontier where that super hard martensite edge meets the softer, shock-absorbing perlite spine. It's the visual proof of the blade's engineered resilience. So, we've covered the materials science and the physics of the shape, but there's a third, equally critical element to all of this. We need to talk about the rituals of the forge and how we can understand them not as superstition, but as a profound form of engineering. Forging a katana was an incredibly complex and long process. And historical sources all agree it was seen as a sacred act, surrounded by Shinto rituals of purification and prayer. But what if those rituals served a deeply practical, almost scientific purpose? Let's just reframe this for a second. Think of the forge not just as a workshop, but as a modern-day clean room. And think of the rituals not as superstitions, but as a sophisticated system of quality control, designed for a process where one single mistake could ruin months of hard work. This really maps it out perfectly. The purification rituals, well, they ensure a contaminant-free workspace and absolute mental focus. The prayers, that's a form of deep mental preparation, setting an intention for perfection. The sacred clothing reinforces discipline and the gravity of the task. And that Shimenawa rope that cordons off the forge, creating a controlled, sacred space, totally free from any interruptions. And that is what we mean by spiritual engineering. It's a method for achieving a state of mind and an environment that's necessary for absolute perfection. It's a technology of focus, built to make sure that the human element, the smith himself, was as flawless as the steel he was shaping. So, after examining the materials, the physics, and the process, let's circle all the way back to our central question. Where does the soul of the katana truly come from?
The soul is not a myth, but it isn't a supernatural spirit either. It is something tangible, something you can see and touch and understand through the lens of science.
The soul is the integration of these three disciplines. It's the material science that takes flawed steel and makes it a flawless composite. It's the physical engineering that uses the forces of nature to create the ideal form. And it's the spiritual engineering that makes sure the human being making it performs with absolute precision.
Ultimately, that's the profound lesson of the katana. It shows us a worldview where there is no separation between the spiritual and the practical, between art and engineering. The soul of the sword is the perfect harmony of its design, the tangible result of mastering matter, physics, and the mind itself.
And that leaves us with a final thought for you. And whatever it is you do, whether you're an artist, an engineer, a chef, a parent, how do you combine your technical skill with that deeper sense of focus, discipline, and purpose? We'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. Thanks for joining this explainer.